Hello again, and welcome to our next episode of How to Sell to NATO. Today, we're going to examine in more detail what NATO buys and how it buys. And in a previous podcast, I mentioned that NATO buys a broad variety of products and services. This includes computer information systems, aircraft parts, and even rubber gloves. But let's focus for a minute on what NATO doesn't buy. And this is a major takeaway in terms of business development focus and what I call the great distinction. NATO does not buy weapons, weapon systems, or platforms. It leaves that up to the individual and sovereign alliance ministries of defense. In other words, if you manufacture sniper rifles or tanks, your target audience, no pun intended, would be the individual alliance ministries of defense. Back to NATO. NATO over the past couple of years has been streamlining its operation to include acquisition. It has gone from 14 different acquisition agencies down to only 3. That right there is an early adapter opportunity. We're going to examine only 2 agencies, NSPA and NCIA. Those 2 agencies represent 85% of NATO procurement. Furthermore, their procurement methods are very similar. I'll be discussing both the procurement method and more in detail each one of these agencies in subsequent podcasts. For the moment, bear in mind that each one of these has 5 different procurement methods, and we'll be focusing on 2, international competitive bidding and dipping into a preferred suppliers list. Now let's examine NCIA just a little bit more closely. NCIA is a NATO Computer Information Agency, and it is an amalgamation of 5 different agencies. NC3A, the NATO Consultation Command and Control Agency; NACMA, the NATO Air Command and Control Systems Management Agency; NCSA, the NATO Computer Information Systems and Services Agency; ICTM, the Information Communications and Technology Service Agency; and ALTBMD, which is the Active Layer Theater Ballistic Missile Defense Agency. I know, these acronyms don't add up. The important part is to understand that although these agencies have been dissolved, the portfolios which they represent and may be of interest to you has been taken over by NCIA. In other words, and in a nutshell, if you are in computer information systems, NCIA is going to be your target. NCIA uses the International Competitive Bid for procurement, but also uses the Preferred Suppliers List, and their Preferred Suppliers List is known as the BOA, or the Basic Ordering Agreement, and you need to register on that list in order to bid. Now let's examine NSPA. NSPA is a NATO support agency, and it is an amalgamation of 3 different agencies. Of NAMSA, which is the NATO Maintenance and Supply Agency; SEPMA, the Central European Pipeline Management Agency; and NAMA, the NATO Airlift Management Agency. Again, NSPA has taken over all these portfolios and buys maintenance, repair, and overhaul for aircraft, as well as weapon systems such as the Patriot missile system. It also buys supplies such as NATO standard ammunition and fuel. It contracts the building of runways and fuel depots. It buys containerized kitchens and even ablution services. Once again, it's very, very broad. And in addition to international competitive bidding, the preferred suppliers list of NSPA is known as a source file. And again, to bid on those contracts, you would have to register on the source file. In my next podcast, I'll be discussing in more detail what NATO is, where it's going, as well as these 2 agencies and their procurement methods. Thanks for joining, and see you next time.